Hello, everyone. How you guys doing?
Hey,
This meeting is being recorded.
So I am going to. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, our second seminar series, joining and co-partner with Wayne Environmental Commission and the New Jersey Academy of Science. Today, I am delighted. I am Dr. Agapito, President of New Jersey Academy of Science. And today, I'm very delighted to actually welcome two great individuals, Mr. Joshua Morris and Ms. Christian de la Cruz, to help us understand a little bit better what is a watershed and how we can get involved in our community. So, nevertheless, let's take it on Joshua. Can you please introduce Mr. Christian de la Cruz?
sure. Thanks for joining, everyone. Appreciate everybody joining us on a Tuesday evening, making time for this. Um, Before we get started, I just want to thank the New Jersey Academy of Science. Um, Without them, they allow us to kind of host these events, and our other partners, the Americorps. Um, as we get started, if you don't mind, right, if you have access to the chat, please let us know what school or town you're from. Um, I believe a lot of people are going to be from Wayne or the surrounding area. So if you don't mind, just throw some information about yourself. Wayne Hills, awesome. Yeah, just so we have an idea of where everybody's from and who we're targeting here. Um, Excellent. Yeah, this is a second in our series of educational programs, and I invite you to join or to visit the Wayne Township website and our page on there to see a list of all the webinars. You could see recorded ones from the past, and you could see ones that we'll be hosting in the future. Um, Now I want to pass it over to a Watershed ambassador from Americorps, Christian de la Cruz. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Joshua, and um, welcome everybody. Uh, Tonight I'll be talking to you all about a little bit about myself, about the program I am a part of, the program I represent, well as a bunch of different things you can do environmentally, locally, just a bunch of different things focusing on uh, your local environment, how you affect it, as well as things you can do to help prevent worsening the conditions of the environment while at the same time uh, protecting your local ecosystems and watershed and all that. Like Joshua mentioned, my name is Christian de la Cruz. I am one of the watershed ambassadors under Americorps. Hold on, I have a slide for this. I'm going to start off with an introduction about myself and the program. Then So, like I said, my pronouns are he, him. I graduated from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, with a double major in information technology informatics, which is a computer major, um, and my other major being environmental studies, which is a lot of conservation and geography focused. Although I'm not from the region I'm in charge of. I'm actually from Bergen County, so I'm a North Jersey native. Some important facts about me is that I studied a lot of coastal erosion and environmental conservation during my time at Rutgers University. I interned with a very popular local organization called the Hackensack River Keepers here in the Bergen County area for 2 summers. And I'm also a continuing volunteer with them every once in a while in terms of things, outreach opportunities like cleanups and other activities. I personally enjoy educating local communities and groups about environmental activism as a whole, and I love getting into the field no matter what the weather. As you can see in the bottom picture of me in a canoe or kayak, even if it's cold, freezing out, I find it so enjoyable just to be outside, outdoors, and just learning about the environment. Next, about the New Jersey Watershed Ambassadors Program. Who are we? What do we do? And why is our program important? As you can see in the photo on the left, we have our current cohort of ambassadors. There's about 20 of us, but more on that in a second. Next, I need to first off, I need to explain what a watershed is. It's a word I'm going to be using a lot, a word I've already said a few times at this point. A watershed generally being an area of land where all the water collects from higher places down to lower places in forming common bodies of water. For example, due to things like gravity, water on top of places like hills and mountains flows down and collects into lower bodies of water like lakes, rivers, streams, estuaries, behind dams, and all those things. And eventually, they flow out into the ocean through things like rivers and groundwater. Um, at this time of year, watersheds are very important because, in general, with all this melting snow, a lot of that water needs somewhere to go. So whether that be the storm drains, which are also part of the watershed, the human-made part of the watershed, all that water eventually flows through these different channels and rivers and estuaries and streams out into the ocean. But more on that in a bit. Next, about the watershed ambassadors. It's a lot of writing, but don't worry, it's pretty simple. Um, we are a group of service members underneath Americorps, Americorps being a federal agency that services the entire nation through volunteer programs and other outreach activities. Uh, Americorps addresses critical and community needs within community or critical community needs all over the country, focusing on things like education, public safety, health, homeland security, and our sector being the environmental sector. In general, we as ambassadors are a free resource to the community. We go around New Jersey doing things like programs like this where we speak about our more educational focused programs and knowledge and share that to local communities. We do projects like cleanups, tree plantings, invasive species removals, and many other things as well. We collaborate with local groups like nonprofits, schools, and environmental organizations. And one of our main focuses is we collect stream assessment data by getting into the streams, into the water, and collecting various different things, including what we call macroinvertebrates or water bugs, basically, in order to tell the health of your local watershed. Why is our program important? Well, it helps raise awareness about water issues all across New Jersey. It improves the water quality and environmental knowledge statewide, and it encourages community involvement and stewardship while promoting safe and informed decision making about your local watershed. Next, we're going to talk about where do I specifically serve and a little bit about the local communities and history of the region. First off, Wayne County generally contains not just the Passaic watershed, but also the Pompton and Ramapo watershed. It's, as you can see in the middle, it's that purple star in the middle map, but where I serve is the whole what we call the WMA4 region. There's 20 different WMAs or watershed management regions across New Jersey, or watershed management areas across New Jersey, and I'm specifically in charge of WMA4, which also includes areas like Passaic, Essex, and Bergen County. Um, in general, the Passaic River, being the main body of water that stretches through my region, stretches about 80 miles across northern New Jersey and emptying eventually out into Newark Bay. One interesting fact about New Jersey in general is that indigenous Lenape people first settled along its banks and later traveled along it, colonizing it and opening it up to trade with settlers, making it a major location for different historical events like the Revolutionary War and early U.S. industrialization. Next, I need to talk about my host agency. A host agency being an agency that um, just like the name suggests, hosts an ambassador for the year. Although the ambassador term is only 10 months, being September to July, they are the ones who, across the state of New Jersey, allow us to have a kind of home base where we could come in and do our work that's not outdoors. We do things like our desk work, our paperwork, and also recording and submitting our information that we gather out in the field For example, my host agency is Liberty State Park Nature Center over in Jersey City. And the state park in general is a very beautiful place. You've got a great view of both New York City as well as uh, Lady Liberty, and they also have many different attractions, like the Nature Center, just being an educational center where different groups can come and just learn about the local ecosystems of Jersey Park or Jersey City and Liberty State Park. Next, I need to talk a little bit more about the local history of the region. In general, the Passaic River was once one of the most polluted rivers in the entire nation. Uh, and ever since a lot of green efforts started moving in and made things like major cleanups and conservation efforts started to be taking place, uh, is now a lot cleaner than it used to be, and it's now a protected site as a national park or along many parts of it. Um, in general, we also have some more information in the middle of the screen, like the river was formed 11,000 years ago by glacial movements by the Wisconsin Glacier. You find a lot of historic sites along the river that are very important to northern New Jersey, like Dundee Dam, um, Passaic or Patterson Great Falls, and other locations that are just in general very historically important to not just the colonization of New Jersey, but also the Industrial Revolution and other industrial movements across the state of New Jersey. Next, we also have more history about North Jersey. We also have another site called the Hermitage State Historical Site, as well as Aquacanonk Bridge in Passaic. Those are more historically significant sites that you can find in North Jersey in WMA4 that focus on not just the history of the American heroes like George Washington and other figures of the American Revolution, but also pays tribute to the uh, original hosts of the original settlers of New Jersey, being the tribes of the Lenni Lenape and other groups like the Hackensack and Raritan tribes of New Jersey, all very important in the early development of New Jersey. Next, we're going to talk about just a little bit more important information and just facts to know about before we move. Facts to know before we move forward. Sorry, I stuttered a bit. Um, just a reminder, a watershed is an area of common land where water drains from a higher place into a lower place and generally collects and is used by the local ecosystem and other environmental aspects like animals and humans. So now, Earth. The Earth is generally 70 to 75% water, and you find water to simplify it, water can be found in many places all across the planet. 97% of that water on Earth is salt water, making it unpotable, being it's not drinkable. It cannot be consumed without being processed heavily. Less than 3% of that water total is fresh water, mostly being locked in glaciers and underground groundwater and other uh, forms of underground waterways. And then less than 1% of that 3% is easily accessible due to in places like streams, rivers, and estuaries, like all across the watershed. Um, in total, if you imagine how little amount of that water that is actually accessible by humans to be consumed and used for our day-to-day needs and necessity, uh, only about 1 teaspoon of a full bathtub would be equivalent to that usable fresh water. Next, what is pollution? Pollution is it good or bad? Pollution generally is very bad. It can be summarized as just the harmful materials that enter Earth's air, water, and land that both damage and hurt different parts of the environment, whether it be the local ecosystems, the plants, the animals, and even us, the humans. We generally try to categorize it into two main focus areas, being point and non-point source pollution. The easiest way to remember and define the difference between the two is that point source pollution is pollutant sources where you can easily take your finger and point to one singular major source of a lot of pollution. For example, you have this drain pipe dumping into a body of water. That's one point source pollution because that drain pipe is doing a lot of damage to that entire ecosystem by dumping all that waste. On the other hand, you have non-point source pollution being sources that are more widespread and less definite as to where the source is coming from. For example, things like animal poop, animal waste, trash, uh, things like pesticides runoff from roads, fertilizers, excess road salt being a major thing at this time of year, and just simple things like oil and excess waste in general are non-point sources of pollution due to them being their sources being a lot of singular sources or a lot of multitudes of sources rather than a singular one. Things like cars are another good example where you have see a lot of them on a day-to-day basis. A singular car isn't going to do too much damage on a day-to-day basis, but in large quantities, they're doing a lot more damage than a singular like dog or piece of trash will do. Next, we're going to talk about stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff being water from rain and water that specifically carries those pollutants into nearby waterways. Runoff is specifically known for traveling across impervious surfaces like roads, hard surfaces like soil, and driveways, and sending that waste directly into our storm drains and preventing it from being properly managed without like being filtered, but usually by things like plants and gardens in the earth. Uh, Impervious surface being surfaces, like I said, a road, hard surfaces, harder soils, and driveways where water can't easily seep into the ground and be absorbed by things like plants or the soil, and be filtered and reintroduced into our local waterways in a cleaner format rather than just going straight into our sewers, into our storm drains, and become mixing with the sewage and eventually flowing out into our waterways and affecting our things like our drinking water as well as the water that animals use. Next, we're going to talk about more about impervious surfaces because it's actually a very major thing in heavily urbanized and suburbanized states like New Jersey. New Jersey being a state that has over 7,000 square miles of land, where about 1,000 of those square miles is impervious surfaces. And during a singular inch of rainfall, about 18.3 gallons of stormwater enters our storm drains. And to visualize that, if you take 38 MetLife stadiums and fill it with water, that's how much water generally falls on New Jersey within the first inch of rainfall. That's a lot of water. And that water, like we mentioned before, is if it's taking all the runoff from roads and sidewalks and all the trash that's collected as well, that just does a lot of damage over time and eventually not only affects our streams and rivers, but eventually gets out into our oceans and harms things farther out than New Jersey. Now, what can you specifically do as a resident of New Jersey, somebody who's more environmentally conscious, somebody who is more keen on protecting our local environment? Things simply like picking up after your pet, trying not to, like, if you're walking your dog, make sure to pick up after them because even a singular piece of dog waste can make a mess and hurt, and that adds up over time. Things like using less or more natural pesticides, fertilizers, and road salts. While in small quantities, pesticides, fertilizers, and road salts are definitely good for us and are very helpful to our day-to-day life. Too much of it can build up and isn't as easily absorbed back into the earth. And when it rains, that it just becomes excess runoff and affects our streams and local bodies of water. Another thing you can do is keep your yards, lawns, and cars very maintained so they're not leaking waste, dripping things like oil and other other substances, just making sure they're not making a mess, and that also becomes excess runoff, don't litter or pick up litter after others. If you see litter on the ground, cleaning that up or joining a local cleanup operation. That's another good way to prevent litter from getting into our local systems. You could also, there's also properly disposing of household chemicals. Like if you have excess medication or expired medication, if you have chemicals that you're not using that are also expired, things like cooking oil also are another uh, substance that needs to be disposed of properly. Else, it can also heavily damage our local ecosystem and environment and watershed. Just finding out where in your town, if they have a local drop-off site where you could send those, or if there's just proper ways to dispose of it rather than just dumping them down the drain. There's also reducing things like single-use plastics instead of drinking a plastic bottle that you get at like the Costco in large bulk, using a reusable water bottle and generally just refilling that with filtered water. Like if you have a Brita filter or something, or simply just drinking tap water because a lot of places have pretty good tap water, but you also do want to check the quality of your tap water because depending on where you are, that can also be affected by things like runoff and wastewater. So you do want to, so tap water can be good, I want to preface, but you do want to check before you start drinking your tap water. Um, because things like lead is also an issue in some of the older parts of New Jersey. There's all and wasting slash using less water in general is just a very good thing you can do to prevent excess waste. Uh, Other than that, uh, another major thing you can do as a community rather than just on an individual scale is collecting and recycling water before it reaches the storm drains via things like what I have on the right side of the screen being green infrastructure. Green infrastructure being a nature-focused approach to treating and managing how humans interact with stormwater and the environment as a whole. Things like rain barrels and rain gardens are two very major, very important, and very helpful things you can you can install in your local uh, towns and even at sometimes on your local property to prevent excess waste and excess runoff. Now, what is a rain barrel? A rain barrel generally can be summarized as a low-tech way to conserve water and save money. Rain barrels collect and store rainwater, usually that runs off from your roof through your downspout, and instead of just sending that water into uh, the storm drain down into our waterways, it collects that water, or at least it collects the first inch of rainfall off your roof, and then you can reuse that water, although it's non-potable because it's too hard and generally it's not as you don't generally want to be drinking water from your roof. It's actually very good for things like using in your garden, using things for cleaning, like if you're cleaning a car, or if you're cleaning maybe even your pet. That water is generally better for outdoor uses rather than just using a hose, using your hose and just using excess water from something like that. General, why are rain barrels special? Because they typically are made of food grade and upcycled plastic or wood or some sort of material that is safe enough for water to not be contaminated by what it's being held in or being contaminated by other outside conditions. It can be made by hand and with easy to gather materials. If you, for example, have a local winery or local food plant, generally, if you could contact them, uh, they are more than open to donating rain barrels or old food grade barrels. We want to make sure they're food grade and not being used for things like chemicals. Um, and you can recycle those into rain barrels. Um, and rain barrels also help prevent things like I said before, runoff into streams and rivers. And also, although they only collect a little bit at a time, they can help over the year collect thousands of gallons of water. Next, what is a rain garden? A rain garden being a beautiful shallow depression that can be low maintenance, inexpensive, and just very pretty. That gardens filled with native and water-loving plants. It's general, like I said, it's generally just a depression into the ground where you install a layered garden system where that allows water to easily filter not just from roads, but also from other hard surfaces, like I said, hard soil and off of roofs, before it reaches local stormwater runoff and waterways. For example, you have the photo in the middle. It's just a look. You could have it both in the middle of roads, in like let's say a divider in the middle of a road. Some towns have dividers with trees and gardens in between lanes, or you could simply have them along the sidewalk, in front of schools, churches, and even on just your local property. If you get a lot of water runoff, if you're, let's say, at the bottom of a hill, um, generally they beautify the local landscape, help improve water quality, uh, reduces a lot of pressure on existing stormwater sewer infrastructure by collecting that first few inches of rainwater in your area. And it but also provides, depending on the types of plants you install into the garden, helps provide a habitat for local group local animals and insects like pollinators and other things. It also, like I said before, if you could see at the bottom here, I don't know if you could see my mouse or not, but at the bottom of the middle image, they usually are layered with different types of substrate and filtration, sand, things like sand, gravel, different types of soil, sometimes even charcoal, to form as a sort of extra filter alongside the plant roots to help filter that excess oil, excess fertilizer, excess metals and waste before it gets into the waterways and return that material back into the ground. Next, more about what we do as ambassadors. Uh, we generally like to ask the question of, is your watershed healthy? To find out if your stream is healthy, we measure it being in two main ways, both visual and biological. Visual measuring being what we call a habitat assessment, being us getting into the stream with our waders and measuring it with long tape measures, meter sticks, and other tools in order to just physically tell how well the stream is doing. We measure things like depth, width, velocity, turbidity being how clear the water is, and how much trash is currently present, as well as other things like if there's animals or anything like that. Um, it helps us tell just on a physical scale how is the stream doing, especially in areas that are heavily uh, commercialized, heavy, have a lot of human traffic, especially since a lot of streams can run along property lines, up through very urbanized areas, sometimes even under highways and roadways. Just telling on a visual scale if the stream is healthy and if it needs any attention other than just letting it be as it is. Then we've also got biological assessments, being like I may have mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, where we collect things called benthic macroinvertebrates, meaning or just simply water bugs. Uh, Water bugs being a type of what's the word? Uh, Indicator species that live in the water for long periods of time, and that if we study them, they can tell us how the stream is doing over time. Since as humans, we're not actively in the stream 24/7, but since they live in the stream, they can easily uh, let us know, depending on the things like the diversity of species in the stream, as well as how those different species are faring, like how healthy they're looking, and that we can use those different, what's the word? Uh, we could just use those features of them in order to tell the stream quality and stream health as a whole, that in other than just being on a physical scale. Now, I know I've been stuttering through a bit, but we're almost done, so bear with me for a bit longer. Um, so now, in terms of some of the other past involvement and events that we ambassadors have participated in and things we actively participate in going forward, We do things like tablings at local events, talking about what things like I'm talking about today, just ways you could help our local ecosystem and prevent our watersheds from being further harmed in other ways. We also do things like tree plantings with local communities, restoring local things like local golf courses and other large fields where where rather than turning them into suburbanized areas, we can reforest them, and hopefully return them to Mother Nature. We do things like rain barrel trainings where we actively teach local communities and groups about I saw chat message pop up. Teach local groups about things like green infrastructure, like rain barrels, how to build rain barrels, how to build rain gardens, the importance of those. We also do things like in-class presentations on various different topics, like macros, like green infrastructure, all different types of things. We attend a lot of conferences, like a lot of green conferences, for example, recently we were at the New Jersey back during the fall, we were at the New Jersey Waterworks Conference, learning about just water health and water quality in general, and the different industries that focus on water quality across the state of New Jersey. We regularly go to a lot of conferences and all that. Um, we also participate in bird watching a lot. A lot of us some of the ambassadors that are in the current cohort or program, they're big into bird watching and bird counting to help help protect the birds that we find along the coastlines of New Jersey, since New Jersey's is a coastal state. You do see a lot of various different bird species that can also be indicators of not only the health of the ecosystems of New Jersey, but also how different bird species are doing as they're traveling through New Jersey and past New Jersey if they're migrating and other things, both north and south. We do tours of local facilities like the Atlantic County Utility Authority, and do things like trash cleanups. For example, you see on the bottom, the Cave and Point Beach cleanup is a cleanup I personally hosted with my host agency, Liberty State Park. And then one of my favorite activities we do is seal watching, where we go out, watch seals, and just make sure none of them are being harassed by local beachgoers, or um, make sure if there's any injured ones, we report them to local wildlife agencies so they can possibly keep an eye on them, make sure those seals are not being harmed in any way by humans. Now, finally, I want to talk a little about some of the events we at Americorps have coming up. For example, at Liberty State Park on March 10th, I'm partnering with my host agency once again on another cleanup of the park, where we are going to be cleaning up the local beaches, or local beach and jetty at the park. And if you want more of that information, feel free to just take a picture of it. Else, we also have Americorps Week coming up, being a week where throughout through from March 8th through the 14th, we have a lot of different projects where local all across the state of New Jersey. So for example, if you're not from the Northeast like I am, where I'm currently stationed, there we have ambassadors all across the state of New Jersey hosting various different events all throughout the month of March. You could go to either our Instagram using the QR code at the top to find out more about those events, as well as the QR code at the bottom. I believe that's our Facebook page QR code. I completely forget, but both of those QR codes should take you to somewhere where you could learn about more about getting involved and seeing what you can do with your local communities if there's any local events coming up near you. And that's the last slide. At this point, I think we're opening it up to questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. I appreciate you giving us that informative presentation on watersheds.
Yeah, no problem.
Before we get to questions, I want to add just a couple of things. Do you mind if people have interest in Americorps or being a watershed ambassador, what's the best way to go about finding out more?
Okay, so like I mentioned at the beginning, us being a watershed ambassador is a 10-month term, like from September to July. Applications do open, and every year it does change. You have to reapply. It does change. The ambassadors for the different regions across New Jersey change. And if you want to personally look into becoming an ambassador, you go to I believe it's either the Americorps main website or the NJDEP website, and you'll find the postings for that once that's up. Else, you can also go, if you look in the bottom left of this current screen I have up, the Learn More About Us QR code. That's to our personal fact sheet that just will tell you just a whole blurb about our program, as well as give you on the back of it or the second page, just the different regions you can of across New Jersey, as well as the ambassadors in charge of those regions. And my information is on the screen, so if you feel like contacting me with any questions or inquiries, I'm more than open to speaking over email.
Awesome. Yeah, I see. I put the link in the chat for the DEP's website for the AmeriCorps program. So if anybody has interest, you can click that in the chat. Maria, before we get started, you have something you want to add?
Yes, thank you so much, Christian, for all that information. It was great. I really want to do a shout out for you because since you said, oh, we attend different conference, New Jersey Academy of Science actually has its annual event this coming April 11th. It's on a Saturday event. We use what we call an STEM showcase, which is the around noon, in which you're welcome to have any particular, a table to you're welcome to like showcase your program. This is a great opportunity to meet about 500 plus in the participants that attend this meeting. And if you want to recruit, you want to pass out information about your program and invite teachers to their classrooms, as you have mentioned previously, this is a great venue to do that and to interact with the young ones, young scientists that are trying to find their way in the STEM community.
Mhm.
So highly recommend it. Maybe if you don't have time, pass it along your group and see maybe among all those 14 or 20 officers within the Americas, maybe they can attend and hold a particular table. You could reach, I think Josh has my information. I will try to reach you. Is that your personal email? The
That's my Watershed Ambassador email. So anything ambassador related, you could send it to that email and
Okay.
I will receive
I
it.
will
It
send
would
it
go
to
straight to
you.
me. Yeah.
That one. That was my first. My second part would be as you mentioned about these ambassador opportunities. So when I want to know, are these ambassador opportunities has to be driven at a student that has to be graduated from undergraduate college? Can it be high school students that can partake into, or are these different programs for high school students? Are different programs for undergrads who maybe want to do a summer program with you guys? And if a graduate wants to get involved, is this the same particular aspect? Is there different applications, different process?
Okay. So the New Jersey Watershed Ambassador Program, like I said, is a 10-month term. I believe it is on the becoming an ambassador is is specifically for if you're a college graduate onwards. But in terms of event, like if you want to get involved as a student in a high school or just any age range, or if you're an adult as well, the events we host as ambassadors or the events we partner on, for example, the cleanup I'm hosting, that's an event where you can get involved with a local community and specifically get involved and get out there and get experience in the environmental industry. Uh, for example, if you look at our AmeriCorps Projects in the Parks post, we have at least 20 different upcoming events for the month of March. Those are just different ways, depending on the event type, different people of different age ranges, different groups, different communities just get involved with their local regions and all that. Um, and if and although some events do fill up fast, we do hold various other events and other programs that uh, if you just follow us on Instagram or Facebook, we're actively advertising as they come up, as we partner with different groups and organizations. So just different ways you can get involved with the program.
Thank you, Christian. The last thing I'm gonna say is thank you, Christian, for doing this. We need more of this. I'm telling you, I'm a graduate of Montclair State University. Back, and I'm gonna mention the year because then I'm gonna reveal my age. But back in the days, I think it was the first or the second class of Americans that joined into New Jersey, actually housed in Montclair, and we started the first America's group that took care of that Passaic water. We were,
Hmm.
and I think one of the America's ambassadors. It's still within the New Jersey DAP working. But I mean, when Christian mentioned how toxic that was, at one point, we were able, me at the time, my significant other, now my husband, we were running that club, and we were found cyanide, in which we had to call the DEP to actually come and check where to track where the cyanide was coming from. We saw fish and turtles with multiple limbs at that time. And when you think that that was like a mutation we were learning now, right? This is exactly what we're seeing in Upper Say River. Now going back almost 20 plus years, it's still, but it's in a restoration aspect. So in your opinion, what do you think about the Passaic River? Is it better? Because it has a lot of programs that came into actually work towards the healing aspect. So I'm very thank you for your time and your work that you are contributing to New Jersey. And now, thank you so much, guys. And there is lots of questions for you, Christian.
Hmm.
Joshua, you want to lead that?
Yeah, sure. If you have any questions, we'll keep them in the chat and we'll read them out. Um, so at first, what are some types of green infrastructure that we can do in urban areas like Newark or Irvington?
Um, like I mentioned before, hold on, I can go back on the slides. Where is it? Or did I pass it? Nope. Come on. In general, green infrastructure is just the entire approach, nature-focused approach to treating and managing how humans interact with stormwater and the environment. Two of those, my personal favorites are the rain barrel and the rain garden. Those are things you can do both locally in your own or locally at home if you attend like a rain barrel teaching session and then build one yourself, or build one as a group for your community. Like for example, local you can build one as a community and install it at a local library or other community building, um, like a town hall or town center. And then rain gardens, just another form of just way green infrastructure that both is pretty as well as helps prevent things like wastewater runoff and all that. Just different ways, different things that help prevent excess wastewater runoff. There's also things like um, green roofing, like install, like although it's not my specialty, there's groups and organizations that specialize in installing plant life onto the roofs of local businesses and buildings. So you have like a sort of garden on those roofs that both not only prevent or help combat things like the greenhouse effect, where it's the sun beaming down on the local building, heating up the inside of it. It helps absorb some of that heat and reflect and distribute that elsewhere, so the buildings aren't getting warmed up as much, so you're not wasting as much energy in the building. There's also the option that I believe some local, I forget who, but I know a professor at Rutgers University, Dr. Abrupta. He is a he specializes in green infrastructure and different approaches to green infrastructure. He's actually the one who taught us ambassadors who headed our training on green infrastructure. So I don't believe I have his information on hand, unfortunately, but if you look up Dr. Chris Abrupta on the Rutgers homepage or something, you generally can reach out to him, and he has a lot more information on green infrastructure as a whole. I actually do
Yeah,
have a completely separate presentation on green infrastructure, but that's different.
yeah, and I will say that it's a good segue actually. So Dr. Obrupta, he hosts a Green Infrastructure Champions training through I think it's going on right now usually, and it's usually free, thanks to some grant dollars and some donations. But he runs that annually, and that's through um, the Rutgers Cooperative. And if you have interest in taking that, I would definitely look into that Rutgers program. Dr. O and his team will be hosting a um, a workshop for Wayne residents and really for all residents. So you can sign up if you'd like. But what they will do is you'll sit down for a presentation, and then Rutgers engineers at a later date, you'll sign up for a time slot, and Rutgers engineers will actually help you design a rain garden for your property. If you are a renter or you really don't have the area for these types of things, um, one of the things you can do, and I think Vula, a fellow commissioner of mine, she was actually part of a adopted drain program in Hoboken. So if you don't really have the room or the budget to kind of get these green infrastructure projects done, there are usually community, especially in some of the more populated areas, like adopted drain or other programs that can help you participate. Um, And since we're on rain barrels and rain gardens, Maria asked how it helps remove pollutants that enter the storm system compared to traditional storm drains, right? And and I'll let Christian answer this a little bit too, but as he discussed, when you have those impervious surfaces and the runoff coming over those surfaces, picking up pollutants, a rain garden is kind of like a first stop where those things are able to settle out. The water is able to go into the earth, and any overflow, though there may be some, in theory those particles would have settled out. And Christian, if you want to elaborate that on a little more, you can.
Yeah, like you said, it's like the first stop for the rain. So let's
Hmm.
say you have a rain garden in your front yard, and rather than some houses having downspouts that just pour straight onto a driveway or straight onto the street, that water would usually go down along the sidewalks, along the road, into our storm drains, and there'd be nothing from the roof, in between the roof and the storm drain, filtering any of those contaminants, any of those pollutants. A rain garden and a rain barrel is more like uh, collecting and recycling water for personal uses. But a rain garden is more like recycling and filtering that water and then distributing it back into the earth before it reaches the systems. Rain barrels and rain gardens don't necessarily reduce or they don't necessarily prevent pollutants from getting into our storm water and storm drains and all that, but they're very important in helping lessen that amount of dirty and polluted stormwater that gets into our drains. Um, like Joshua mentioned, it's more of like a filter in terms of the first stop, where the water generally flows into the garden first, and then whatever is water in that garden slowly gets absorbed by both the plants and filtered down through the different substrate and materials that you build the garden out of, and then it's distributed back into the ground where it's filtered, cleaned, and any remaining water, hopefully at that point, is returned to underground water sources and maybe even redistributed to local waterways and that in a more cleaner state, rather than that dirty water just going straight from the road into our stormwater. And then if that or one thing I didn't mention that's a bit of a different topic, combined if your city or town has a combined sewage overflow system, meaning your sewer system and where the rain and your storm drains, if both one or both of them tend to overflow, they combine and then flow out together, so you get a lot of dirty sewage water out of where your rainwater would usually be being distributed out into our waterways. So you're just preventing a lot of that dirty water from getting into our storm drains is the first step. And having a lot of, although singular rain garden can only do so much, having a lot of rain gardens and rain barrels can actually be more of an impactful effort rather than just something small.
Thanks, Christian.
How's it going? Can I chime in on that real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead, Leaf.
Great presentation, by the way. Really, really great. Enjoyed watching it, and I love learning more and learning about the local stuff. And I've been kind of involved in, we called it low impact development in California back when I was in college. And then when I moved out here to New Jersey, it's kind of the green infrastructure. But what I wanted to add about cisterns is one of the big benefits, as you were mentioning, is it helps with the flood surge. So when you can, catch some water in even small tanks, but the bigger they are, the better. Then you help with that surge of flooding, and you can kind of trickle that water out over time into the landscape. And the other reason for that is also resiliency. Having stored water in the landscape or next to your house is really important for basic human survival, right? When the water systems shut down or have issues, or if there's boil alerts, but also just using that rainwater, that cistern for watering the landscape. So, and then of course in drier climates, the cisterns can be really important for fire prevention as well. So you get this one, this is what's cool about what you're talking about, Christian, is you do these single things, right? Like a rain garden, and it has multiple synergistic benefits as an outcome. So we want to do water testing of the watersheds in Wayne. We did a study with Rutgers and Dr. Abrupta on the watersheds in Wayne and what we can do, and we have some plans and maps. We just got to really, like, in the next 2 years, we really got to get focused in on the watersheds and specific strategies and tactics to do enhancements and restorations, and then we can really make a huge improvement.
Yeah, great points, Leaf. Thank you. Leaf is a chair of the Wayne Environmental Commission and um, endless source of knowledge for things like this. There's a few other questions that have to do about stream banks and riparian areas.
Mhm.
And there's the value of stream banks and streams in general. They're great sources, or they're great areas to remove pollutants from stormwaters. Um, One of the questions has to do with replanting stream banks and what plants to use. And one of the coolest things I've seen recently is the implement or the use of tree stakes. Basically, you just cut a branch off, right? A smaller branch of a native species that roots and grows quickly, similar to, like Leaf mentioned, the black willow, certain dogwoods, sycamores, buttonbush, winterberry, things like that, and you just stick them right in the ground. And these things, right, certain time of year, um, right before they leaf out in the spring, and they just root, and they can do a great job. And it's a real easy, inexpensive way to repair a stream bank that's eroding. But if you have any, have you ever been part of any stream bank restoration projects? Um, and have you seen any benefits from that?
I haven't specifically, no, not in my term of service, but when I was at Rutgers, I was a part of the Rutgers Forestry Club. We did a lot of things like just local involvement in terms of planting trees, helping maintain local parks and other things like that, as well as attending forestry conferences and everything. Um, but specific, although plant ID is not my specialty as well,
Hmm.
like IDing plants and animals is not my specialty. I'm more of a geography type person. I did study a bit of one of my focuses at Rutgers was coastal erosion. So it's kind of similar where similar to how we have beach dunes and depending on the types of plants you plant on those dunes and uh uh depending on like oh sorry I'm gonna gather my thoughts depending on the types of different plants, especially native plants versus using different things like invasive plants have different effects on the local ecosystem, have their own strengths and weaknesses. I don't have any of the materials on me at the moment, but there's a lot of different resources and different groups you can look into that have information. For example, I believe they are the the Pinelands. There's groups down in the Pinelands, a lot of them who focus on Pinelands. Oh, damn, I just had it this morning. I had like a pamphlet from them this morning, but I unfortunately don't have it on me right now. But there's a lot of groups across New Jersey that focus on not only selling and focusing on native species, but native species that specialize in living in and supporting local different ecosystems and regions. For example, if you're in a marshy area, salt marsh area, there's specific plants that are more beneficial for those areas. That's both not only will survive better in those conditions, but thrive in those conditions and help uh, other creatures and in those ecosystems thrive better, rather unlike unlike some other plants. But then I feel like I'm droning on, but
I can jump in on the habitat restoration real quick just to add that, basically like you were saying, Christian, it's this habitat approach. So you want to look at where are you trying to restore? What kind of an ecosystem is it? Is it a watershed? Is it an upland wetland? Is it a forested woodland area? So you identify your ecosystem types, and then you can kind of start to look at what are the native plant species that you're going to use to try and restore that habitat. And the whole entire approach is really you want to restore that basic soil system. Like if you can get some plants woven in there with like willows, sprouting, and then some little seedlings of other trees, good diversity in there. What you're going to do is create a soil food web. You're going to create an ecosystem that's going to then be self-supporting. And so that's the goal with like restoration on a big scale is you identify what, habitat, come up with a restoration plan, and then a management plan, and then you just go for it. And it's amazing what native plants do. Someone asked if there's a superhero in restoration, and yeah, I would say native plants, they're evolved and designed to be doing these things. And we just there's like different kinds of ecosystems that you plant with like a rain garden, for example, as opposed to when you're restoring a river or a creek or a grassland or whatever the ecosystem is. So I'll wrap there, but yeah, great conversation, loving it.
I also do
Thanks,
want
Leaf.
to.
Thanks, Christian. Good. No, good. Keep going.
I do want to add, I see somebody asking specifically about how those riparian buffer zones and native stream bank vegetation uh, reduce the stormwater pollution. I believe Leaf mentioned it briefly, but uh, similar to how rain gardens act as a filter and a buffer in terms of the rainwater. For if you have a road, let's say you have a roadway a riparian zone in between a stream and a roadway, having a lot of plants that can not only block larger pieces of trash from getting into the waterway, but also a zone where you could filter a lot of those smaller particulates like metals, oil, uh, waste, like animal waste and stuff like that from getting from the road into the water. Like for example, if the plants are a lot better at absorbing those materials before it gets into the waterway, that's a major way to prevent those pollutants from getting right into the water before it can do any damage. Just being kind of like a barrier that also acts as a filter is just a very important part of both planting native plants that are beneficial to the local specific specifications of the local environment as well as repairing local riparian zones. I hope that was
Yeah, no, awesome. That was great. It's 8 p.m. I think we got most of the questions in there. In case I'll wait another minute in case anybody wants to throw one in. But in the meantime, take a look through the chat. There's been some great links thrown in there, whether it's Americorps, um, the Green Infrastructure Champions Program from Rutgers, um, and some of the other discussion, both about keeping bugs out of your rain barrels. Uh,
yeah. I just saw that question in terms of standing water in rain barrels. Generally, you don't if you have a rain barrel, there is some maintenance that you have. It's not maintenance free, although it can sit there for a while. Uh, there's things that you could do like Leaf mentioned, you could have bug screens or dunks on it to prevent those mosquitoes from getting into the water. There's there's also uh I believe one of my colleagues mentioned something. I could be wrong about this, but there's certain sprays made from natural plant oils that prevent that if you just spray it on the surface of the water, it kind of breaks up the coating, the viscosity of the water, so the mosquitoes can't land and lay the eggs on the water. There's various different things you can do when you're learning about green infrastructure and rain barrels. to prevent issues with the standing water. Also, in terms of avoiding things like if your water does get contaminated or any way like that, like if the water's been sitting there for a long time, um, you generally try to replace or at least use the water within like a certain amount of time of it being collected before you empty it and then open it up to collecting more water. And I had another.
Yeah, and and to his point, like use the water in the rain barrel, right? And even if it's the next day after the rain event, you want to make sure that that rain barrel is emptied so that it can catch the next initial flush from a rainstorm, right? So even waiting a day, and even if if you have rain a couple days in a row, and you just take that water and dump it out on your lawn the day after the rain, you've still done the initial job of stopping that initial surge through the system, and by putting it on your lawn or somewhere else, just allowing it to infiltrate naturally. So making sure that it's empty to prevent bugs growing, but also to be ready for that next influx of rain is important for those rain barrels. It looks like
Okay.
that's all we have. Unless somebody, Leaf, you want to jump in?
Well, there was a quite an impressive question, like the basis of an essay or a big research project. What are the main objectives of watershed management?
Um,
What role does watershed management play in reducing non-point source pollution? I don't know if we have time to go through all of these, but these are great questions.
they are great questions. I think we mentioned a lot about the non-point source solution, right? You can, um, managing that watershed and preventing those non-point source pollution coming in is really something that we can do, and the infrastructure that we build can do.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah, like just being more conscious of how you're affecting what you're doing, whatever you do, and how that affects the local ecosystem is just a very good first step being in terms of preventing issues with pollutants getting into our waterways and all that. And also in terms of the main objectives of watershed management, I touched on it briefly before, but I was kind of speeding through it all. But in general, our main purpose is or one of our main purposes that I specifically focus on is educating local communities. Education and outreach and stewardship are all major first stepping stones in terms of just letting people know how they are affecting those ecosystems and what they can do in return in terms of preventing issues from happening in the future.
Great points.
absolutely. One thing I'll add just to kind of summarize some of that is that it all comes back to the garden, right? Everything that we're doing is all about the landscape and the earth and the garden ecosystem. So to kind of summarize some of the points in that question, that big sort of the multiple questions in one comment, um, we're trying to create ecosystems. So it's not just about the rainwater, right? It's about the plants and the soil health. We want to build soil carbon because soil carbon is a huge factor in filtering the runoff in the water. And it's the best way to get carbon out of our atmosphere, actually. So, regenerative agriculture is really moving in that direction with getting carbon into the soil and boosting fertility. And this is really in an urban landscape, it's the same idea. We want to try and create as much carbon sequestration, as much, plant life, filtering the rain and the water, and then enhance the soil so that the soil is also a big part of as well as the mycelium, the fungi. It's all a network of water filtration that we're trying to create from the top of the watershed down to the creeks and the rivers.
Yeah, thank you for also I see one or two questions about where they could look for more information other than on top of all the links that some people have been posting in the chat. I also want to do a sort of shout out if to the Watershed Institute down in South Jersey. They are a major both partner for the Watershed Ambassador Program and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, but they are a major leader in terms of watershed management and water care across the state of New Jersey. So if you're ever interested in just learning more about what you can do specifically do because they have a lot of programs outside of what we Americorps members do, that you can do locally in terms of just small scale and both large scale involvement. For example, during this past winter, since road salt is a major issue in terms of water quality, they host a program called Salt Watch Monitoring, where you can sign up. They'll send you test strips and a few times during the winter, if you go out to a local body of water, you follow the instructions, you test the salinity of the water, and then you send the results back to them through their website. It'll help them monitor across the state of New Jersey the health of uh, the water and in terms of salinity, especially in areas that are especially areas that are heavily filled with roadways and cars. I actually have the link for that one. I'll post that in the chat real quick before we end, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Christian, quick question. For that one, does it include like creeks?
I believe it's basically any body of water where salt from roads can run off into the water. For example, when you're submitting the information on their main web page, um, there's different options for the types of body of water you're testing from. For example, I participated in this winter and I tested two of my local streams in the region.
Okay.
Awesome. And Leaf made a good point, that, everything's connected, right? Especially in a watershed and to work, and it really goes from the top of the mountain down to the ocean. And one of the things I'll point out is that it's a lot more efficient and achievable to implement smaller projects at the top of a watershed than to implement major, you know, capital improvement type projects or infrastructure projects at the bottom of the watershed. So rain gardens and things like that really are the best way to kind of stop and control that initial flow and remove pollutants from the stormwater.
Can I ask
And yeah,
one quick question, or was there someone else?
no, go ahead.
So if we were to say, for example, take Preakness Brook here in Wayne and do some water sampling, do some testing. I was just showing our planner, our town planner, the other day where I was finding some pollution coming out from some drainage areas. And we want to do some water quality testing, but also if we wanted to look at doing like a restoration of this Preakness Brook all the way up through Barber Pond and up to High Mountain and create this whole like habitat corridor of restoration. Is that something that your organization would want to help with?
Um, that's definitely something we could partner with. I don't know how much we could contribute to that because
Mhm.
as ambassadors, we are just more so just us ambassadors. We don't really have much major funding or grants or anything like that. That's usually we're generally more of like the outreach and stewardship sort where we can help with things like advertising and getting communities involved and getting feet on the ground. We don't really have the immediate resources and access to materials that groups like a local DPWs would have, like
Right,
tools and
right.
materials and all that.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
it's
you have
definitely
a
something
role.
we
You
could
you,
look
you
into. Yeah.
participate and support and educate and network.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, we'll definitely want to follow up on that, on all the watersheds in Wayne, really, but specifically, we're going to focus some work, or at least sort of generally, like in kind of what's becoming the new downtown area of Wayne. But yeah, bigger conversations. Great discussion, everyone. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I want to thank Christian for joining us. Really appreciate everything. We'll just drop the link into for the Environmental Commission page. Feel free to join to add your name to our volunteer list. Look at some of our presentations that are coming up or other information. I want to thank Maria and the New Jersey Academy of Science for hosting this with us and making this all possible. And Leaf, thanks for joining in. Thank you for everybody for joining. I know we went a little bit over, but I think it was a really good discussion, and I hope everybody learned some. Um, have a great Tuesday, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice night.
Good night.
Good night, guys.